All right, and we're back to answer more questions, as always. Is Jada / Anne the Lex Luthor of TWD? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Meaning she was good and turned bad? Maybe. I think that could be her arc. But I also, like I said in yesterday's video, I think that there's a good chance she'll come back around. So even though she kind of defected and she betrayed Rick several times, I think there's a chance that she'll get a redemption arc. And maybe that's what you mean by Lex Luthor. I'm not sure. You might need to clarify that for me. But I think her arc is interesting. All right, next one. Why hasn't Negan mentioned to anyone about seeing a helicopter when Jadis had him tied up after Simon killed her people? I don't know. I don't know what Negan's logic would be there. I think in terms of the logistics of the story, they just don't want anyone to know about that. But I also think that there's a specific reason for it. I think that'll come back into the story. Like, I mean, you could argue that Rick never talked about a helicopter, even though he saw one more than once. He saw one in Atlanta, and I don't remember if he ever told anyone about that. But remember, during All Out War, he did see a helicopter fly overhead, but he, as far as we know, didn't really talk about it. I mean, they know there's other civilizations out there, and so they probably just aren't overthinking it. You know, they're, oh, okay, well, somebody's got a helicopter, but if it's not affecting them, then what difference does it make, you know? So, I don't know, I would like to hear his logic for that, and we haven't, but it will also be interesting to see if he sees a helicopter again and remembers that and knows that maybe Jadis is inside and how that is going to affect things, especially now that he's in New York. So, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure it's a setup for something to come. So, it'll be interesting, for sure. All right. I really dislike how the fandom treats Laurie Holden for the way how she portrayed her role as Andrea in The Flagship when she has no control of the direction of the show. Glenn Mazzara did her a disservice for the show and did her extremely dirty. She deserves so much better. Yeah, I agree, and it's one of those things that's unfortunate. I will say that I didn't really care for Andrea's character when I was watching the show. I never read the comics, and I know that most people liked her character in the comics and didn't really like how she was portrayed in the show. And I agree that, number one, no matter whether you like her portrayal or not, you don't have any right to hate on her for it. Like, nobody should be treated that way. So I 100% agree with you there. When you portray a character a certain way, some people are going to like it, some people aren't. And sure, it's not terribly fair the way that she's treated sometimes. It really amounts to the same thing. Even if you don't like the portrayal, you keep that to yourself. You know, you don't have to like it. You can just stop watching the show and not treat people badly for it. It's also very true that she didn't have a whole lot of say in what happened in season 3, and the showrunner Glenn Mazzara from season 3 was fired for just killing off characters without direction. And yeah, none of that was Laurie Holden's fault. For a long time, people didn't know exactly what went down other than rumors, but she did come out and talk about it and about how she was supposed to survive. She had like an 8-year contract or a 7-year contract, and they were going to do with her more closer to what was in the comics, and then it just changed. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Even though I didn't care much for Andrea's character, I really didn't, but I agree that she ought to be treated with respect, and yeah, it's just too bad that that happens. So yeah, thanks for saying that. I think that's something that everybody needs to keep in mind. What's your thoughts on Bulletproof Picasso song, PPP, and where the guy points out a spot on the map? Rewatch the video. Sure looks like he points to the area Daryl and Carol were, plus all the other similarities. It's just bizarre. Okay, so honestly, once I got this, I went and rewatched it because I had not watched the Bulletproof Picasso video in a long time. If anyone doesn't know what that is, it's just it's a music video for a song by Train that Emily starred in years ago now. It was not too long after Coda that she was in it. And I'd honestly forgotten about the PPP in it, so that's super interesting. What I will say is that I 100% believe that when the actors, especially Norman and Emily, are in music videos like this, I think they absolutely do put Walking Dead clues in them. We've definitely seen them in Emily's music videos, and we've seen really obvious things about The Walking Dead in general. Like, she has a little Walking Dead doll that we've seen in the music videos that's actually hers in her apartment, and then she's made up lyrics about The Walking Dead, unreleased Walking Dead episodes and things like that. So that should be proof that they do put these little hints into the songs, but a lot of times they're symbolism and TD stuff, so they're not going to draw a lot of attention to them or explain what they are. So in this particular video, there's a few things. There's the PPP on the wall, which is directly tied to the CRM. And the reason we know that is because when Tara found the PPP card, it was when Heath was taken, and we didn't know it at the time. But after that, Angela King confirmed that he was sold to the CRM. So we don't know what PPP means, but it is directly tied to the CRM, which is another reason that we think that Beth will be entangled with the CRM somehow. And we have a PPP in this music video. There's also a black and white theme going on in the video because the man at the beginning that she doesn't like, who she gets angry at, is wearing white from head to toe, white suit, white tie, white hat, whole thing. And the car he's in is black that they steal. So there's a black and white theme going on. The other thing that I've not talked about in a while is that the blue waitress uniform that she's wearing, that's like a button-up dress sort of thing, we saw that exact dress in Fear the Walking Dead. It was an episode about John Dory Sr. and a murder that he never solved from years ago, and the woman who was killed, whose body he never found, was a waitress, and she was wearing the exact same outfit. And I'm sorry, no one will ever convince me that that is a coincidence, that they just so happened to make a creative choice that mirrored Emily's outfit in the Bulletproof Picasso video, which also has a PPP in it. That's too many coincidences for me to believe that. So I think this is a great observation on your part, and definitely look at the music videos. The ones Norman comes out into very often have clues, and sometimes they're just small callbacks to the show itself. Like, it might not be necessarily a Beth and Daryl thing, but we found a lot. I mean, most of you probably know about the ones that are in Emily's songs because those get talked about a lot in the fandom, but there are older ones like this and other ones that Norman's been in that also have them. So definitely keep an eye on those, and look for things like this when they come out, because it's just fun. It's really, really fun to see them. And I actually really like this video. It's just a fun video. So it is a video about a romance. And so with that stuff being in it, it makes it feel like it's a foreshadow of Beth and Daryl's romance, and they're hinting that eventually, via the PPP storyline, Emily will go back and she'll go back to the show, and Beth and Daryl will get their romance. So that's the way I interpret it anyway. So we never found out what these coda symbols in the trees that Morgan was following in season 5 meant, along with Grady, Beth's body, and a ton of other stuff that seems like a very big loose thread. Indeed. No, we have never been told what they mean, and they aren't even exact coda symbols. They're more like X's, but if you turn an X on its side, it becomes a T, which could be a cross, and because there's a circle around it, it looks like crosshairs on a gun if you're, sighting for marksmanship, and it looks like a coda symbol. And the episode was called Coda, so it's hard to dismiss the fact that it looks like a coda symbol and the episode was called Coda. So no, we don't know what they mean exactly. They haven't ever talked about it. Obviously, the writers know what they mean. And yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, we don't know that it was Morgan who found Beth, but it seems like a pretty obvious link, given that at the end of Coda, he shows up in his own coda, and there are coda symbols on the trees. I mean, it's almost ridiculous to think he isn't involved somehow. But again, we just don't know the details. So yeah, I mean, so many mysteries. And once again, if you think about Morales, they do not leave loose ends. Gimple does not leave these mysteries unsolved. He will tell us eventually. It's just a matter of waiting until he does. So we're here for the wait. Regarding Daryl's grandfather's grave scene, I have the theory that it means if Daryl stays in France, he will die literally, or will stay dead emotionally. His whole time in France just represents Daryl's unresolved feelings for Beth, Isabel, and regarding himself, Laurent. The fact that he is torn between leaving or not represents his inner conflict of letting go of Beth's death and how it influenced him. As long as he stays in France, it's still about Beth, unhealthy for him. I do not think that Carol's purpose in France is to find Beth with Daryl like season 5. I actually think she's in France to help him letting go of Beth, and then he will go home to her. And the moment we know that Daryl let go of that burden, Beth will likely appear and starting a new story between them. Plus, if there's an Isabel romance happening in S2, then it will also still about Daryl's hidden desire to be with Beth. So I think that's all interesting. I do think that you're right about a lot of that. I think that his unresolved feelings for Beth have been present, like this unseen presence, since season 5. We saw them when he was depressed and withdrawn. We saw them when he got really brutal during All Out War. Obviously, they were there with Leah. And yeah, I think they're still present. So I think you're right about that. And it's interesting. I've had a couple of people tell me that Laurent represents Daryl and his inner child, and I think that very well could be. I think the writers do take into account that level of things. So you're probably right. I don't know. I still think there's a good chance she could show up in France in season 2, or I don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes. I could see it either way. Either way, I think she will show up there. And I think that Carol will... I think she will be part of his search for Beth, because she was before. And I don't think that we can dismiss that. But I don't know. If we look at Consumed as a template, and this is something that Galadriel Jones pointed out to me, because she rewatched it recently, and she said, really, like we said before, Consumed was a Carol episode more than a Daryl episode. Daryl was still really optimistic in that episode. He was there. He was going to find Beth. He wasn't worried about it. Obviously, he was very focused and very determined, but he was trying to get Carol to be more optimistic, and she was the one who was being super destructive. She tried to leave the group, and he went out to stop her. She went with him to find Beth, but I mean, the main reason for that, the main reason she didn't try to leave again right then, is because, you know, there were people to be killed, and that's just Carol. She's going to go to battle all the time. So she was willing to go with him, but she was being dark. She was being, you know, he wanted to put down the Walker mother and child that they saw, because he didn't want her to do it. And it wasn't because he didn't think she could or she didn't deserve to. It's because he knew she was in a really dark place, and he was trying to pull her out of that. And he kept saying things like, okay, but you're here right now. Just try. You need to be trying. And she was trying really hard to not do that, to, you know, be negative. And so what Galadriel Jones said was that Consumed was actually a journey of faith for Carol, and didn't end particularly well. But so with that being the case, it'll be interesting to see what the dynamic is when Carol shows up in season 2. And keep in mind, I don't know, it'll just be interesting to see how it all goes, because we saw Carol at the end of the episode, but she is not in France yet. She's still in the States. And I was a little bit surprised by that. I thought she was going to show up in France, and, you know, she's getting there, but just not quite yet. So I still kind of wonder how much she'll be in. Are they going to do a little bit of a time jump by a month or something, so that all of a sudden she's in France? Maybe. But it'll be interesting to see what frame of mind she's in, because we didn't get a whole lot of that from that one scene. She's obviously very determined to find Daryl, but we don't know if she's in a good frame of mind or not. And so if the tables are turned and it's now him that's in a negative frame of mind and she's in a good one, I mean, that would be interesting. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling. I think that this is a really interesting perspective, and I think it's possible, but I also think that we shouldn't underplay the fact that Carol her arc has always been tied up with Beth's, always. And so the fact that she's coming into the show just tells me that they are on the fast track to running into Beth. I mean, you could actually be completely right, but if you are, I still kind of think that it's going to play out pretty quickly in season 2. So maybe it only takes the first episode or two for him to let go of things, as you say, and then, you know what I mean? Like, we just don't know exactly what the timeline's going to be, that's all. But I really do like the way that you've laid this out, and I think it's super interesting. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. All right, I'm going to call it there for today. Sorry if I rambled a little bit on that one, but I'll be back tomorrow with more.